我哋而家開會啦，就政制。
Let's start our meeting. This is the meeting of the panel on constitutional affairs. Please invite the officials to come in. Item 1 on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. After the last meeting, we've not issued any information paper. Items for discussion at the next meeting. We'll wait till the government representatives have come in.
好，我哋好多謝政制及內地事務局。
I'd like to thank Mr. Raymond Tam, Secretary for Constitution and Mainland Affairs, Mr. Gordon Leung, the Deputy Secretary, and Mr. Sunny Pao, the Assistant Secretary, for attending this meeting. For the next meeting, we have 2 proposed items. Perhaps I should ask the SEMA, Secretary for Constitution and Mainland Affairs, to introduce those 2 items to us. Thank you, Chairman. The next meeting will be held on the 19th of January 2015. We've proposed 2 items. First of all, as in the past, we would like to brief members on the CE's 2015 policy address. And the next item proposed by us is the review on financial assistance and electoral expenses for the candidates of 2015 District Council election. We'll have to review 2 issues, the ceiling for financial assistance and then the electoral expenses ceiling. We'll brief members on our preliminary proposals and take views from members. After taking views from members, if the relevant amounts are to be adjusted before the 2015 District Council election, we have to complete the legislative amendment exercise. So we propose to come here at the next meeting to introduce the issues to members. Mr. Charles Marker, I saw your hand. Are you on this item? No. The next one. Ms. Emily Lau. Chairman, what about constitutional reform? What is the administration doing? The 4th quarter was mentioned. If the government does not honor its undertaking, we cannot proceed any further. They rejected everything from us. They rejected universal suffrage as proposed. So, when will they come to explain to the LegCo? We're talking about the items for discussion at the next meeting. Well, if they're not discussing this time, they have to discuss this next time. Mr. Chairman, the 2 items proposed by us for the next meeting is the briefing for the CE's 2015 policy address, which will hinge upon matters to be processed for the 2017 CE election. We said previously that if we are to start public consultation in January, if we can start from the LegCo meeting on the 7th of January, then after discussing with the chairman, the trio on constitutional reform can come here at the next meeting to do an introduction. So after communicating with the chairman, we'll make appropriate arrangements. We'll definitely come to the CA panel to have a discussion with members. Mr. Chairman, this is such a major issue. We do need a special meeting. We shouldn't discuss this in a regular meeting, which covers other items. The government has not grasped the pulse of the public concern on this. Now it's already December. It seems that the government does not know what to do. That is how to handle such important issues. Any supplement? No? Dr. Helena Wong, you have raised your hand. We're discussing the items for discussion at the next meeting. You're on the ensuing items, right? Then wait for a while. once the government has triggered the second round of consultation, in accordance with the practice of this panel, we'll definitely have a special meeting. And the Bureau Director will come to do a presentation. Then we'll at least have 2 public hearings. That's our practice in the past. So we'll await the notification of the government. We've adjusted our agenda items. Originally, the last item for discussion will be issues relating to the submission of the public sentiments report by the Task Force on Constitutional Development. Last time, members would like to have a briefing on this public sentiments report. Then I fetched the SCMA. The SCMA will be otherwise engaged later in the afternoon, so he'd like to have this item discussed first. Therefore, I have adjusted the order of the agenda items. The SCMA is in a hurry today, so I have not reserved too long a time for this discussion. SCMA, you have submitted a paper to us. Is it necessary for you to supplement on the paper? Apparently, members are very eager to ask questions. Any supplement? Chairman, as you said, the paper explained the background and the latest situation to members. First of all, I have to thank you, Chairman, for advancing this item on the agenda for discussion. Then I can manage my diary better, and I'll be able to listen to members' views. As the paper is rather simple, I think I can start to take views from members. For the time being, I saw 6 hands for questions. I'll read out the names to see if there's any omission or whether any other members would like to ask questions. The Bureau Director is to stay for 30 minutes only. So I'll see what arrangement should be made. Charles Mok, Helena Wong, Wong Kwok Hing, Chang Lai Wan, Chan Chi Chun, Emily Lau, Starry Lee, Tony Jie, and Christopher Chung. Ip Kok Him. Any more? Have I omitted anybody? Please count how many persons altogether. 10. 10. Then 2 minutes each. All right. You speak first, and then I'll ask the Bureau Director to answer your questions in one go. With 10 persons here, 2 minutes each. But 2 minutes cannot cover both questions and answers. Suppress the time frame. In what way? Well, he is still working out the package, so if you have any views, just tell him, and he'll consider. Well, let's do it this way for the time being, otherwise we'll be wasting our time. Mr. Charles Mok, we're worried that this public sentiments report will be compiled in a wishy-washy manner. Yesterday, we saw the Bureau Director say that there will not be time for meetings. So members of the public query your sincerity in this. If you come here again for 30 minutes only, then it's tantamount to nothing. The paper is very short, 3 pages only, no timetable. You come here, I really don't know what questions you are going to answer. This supplementary paper is nothing. It's tantamount to nothing. Any supplementary information for us today?
Mr. Chairman, I think apart from this morning and during the noontime, the occupied areas have been further cleared. And for the public sentiments report, the main constitution of it would be more or less done, more or less finite. And the colleagues are gathering relevant information, and I believe our preparatory work is nearing the end. And as pointed out in the paper here, we are collecting views and also data which are objective. There are no policy proposals or subjective opinions. Well, Mr. Chairman, I think there is no answer from the Secretary. I mean, if we want to draw some objective facts, in fact, those are in the newspapers already, and Beijing would have seen those, but really we are trying to draw some conclusions. What are you trying to do in the report? We want the public's views. Will you be incorporating public's views into the report? As for Hong Kong people's views, through the main bodies and public statements, especially for those submitted to the government, and also the public opinion surveys within this period, and also through different channels, through signatory campaigns, etc. All these will be included in the public sentiments report. Mrs. Wang, does it mean that the government will be submitting this public sentiments report? Now, what is under discussion is the content. What about the timing? Do you already have a timetable? Mr. Chairman, the preparatory work is nearing completion. We will find an appropriate time to do the submission, and I'm sure this will be made available to you all for perusal. And I would believe 80%, 90% of the work is done. What is the timetable? Well, it will not be long. Will it be early January? Now, in fact, the 3 occupied sites have all been cleared by the government, and the umbrella movement incorporating people of different age groups and backgrounds, and they are, despite contravening the laws, they are coming out. I would like to know whether their insistences will be incorporated into the report and also reflected to the central government. In September, October, and November, the actual situation in Hong Kong, well, in fact, not too many is expected initially that there will be so many people of such insistence. Will these be reflected in the report? Mr. Chairman, yes, the stands from the different groups which have been made known to the government time and again will be incorporated into the report. Mr. Chairman, the Causeway Bay illegal occupation had been cleared today, and therefore the occupation had come to an end, and it is indeed time for the government to draft the public sentiments report. And the report should be objective, fair, and reflective of reality that occurred in Hong Kong. The chaos in the past 3 months of Hong Kong and the discontent of the public of Hong Kong, all these should be in detail reflected in the report. And also, very important, I think, is that in the next stage of constitutional reform consultation, this is the main content, I would think. The consultation for constitutional reform in its next stage, how should it be conducted? This is something that we're all focused on. The public sentiments report should, together with the next stage of consultation, supplement each other. And the next stage of consultation should be used as a main theme in this regard. I would like to hear the Secretary's response to this. Mr. Chairman, as for Mr. Wong Kwok Heng's point about our being objective, fair, and reflective of reality for the public sentiments report, that indeed is the criteria for our work, myself and my colleagues, and it should complement the consultation for constitutional reform. That is indeed true, and we will be doing so. Mr. Chairman, in particular, the main theme and content, I think we have to be very clear. Let us not put the cart before the horse. Yes, Ms. Chang. Mr. Chairman, I also support Mr. Wong Kwok Hing in saying that this report should be reflective of the reality. Now, I've looked at the main framework and basically the introduction, background, and future development. For recent developments, for the public consultation, there should be 3 items reflected. First of all, the anti-occupation views, and also 80% to 90% of the public of Hong Kong want the occupation to be done away with. And also the last round, also 40% to over 50% of the people were supportive of that. Now, after recent developments, there should be effect or consequences on public life and also the economy of Hong Kong. And I'm sure the central government is very would like to know about that as well, very much so. Yes, on the public consultation for the 31st of August until the end of the period, the interim period, all those public surveys and opinion surveys that have come to our attention, we will include those. And those would include all kinds, including constitutional reform, surveys and Occupy Central related surveys, etc. They will all be included. As for the economic consequences and public livelihood consequences, I will have to go back and digest that suggestion. I will have to look at whether there are academics or institutions which have done studies in that regard. I will have to look into that further. Mr. Chan Chi-chun? Yes. I hope that this yellow umbrella can be included into the report when you submit it. And it seems to me that there is a tension in the government. In paragraph 6 of the paper, it says that the Hong Kong Federation of Students further toughened after the meeting by openly rejecting the 4 responses made by the government, expressing there was no room for dialogue with the government. Now, do we still have to debate whether we draft this report or not draft it, and the timing? I mean, what is the purpose and objective of this public sentiments report? Now, after meeting with the Hong Kong FS, perhaps it was an exchange with the FS for their clearing of the occupied zones, but it seems that the zones have already been cleared, and so this is no longer important as an exchange with them. Now, the data, the surveys, the public opinion surveys, etc., that the Secretary had mentioned. In fact, the central government seems to know all about this. They seem to be more in the know than a lot of other people concerning all these. If you want to just compile all these studies and just put them into a file and submit them to the central government, then it's useless. Well, I think this is a reflection and a report on reflection on the part of the government and the report on the conscience of the government. If that is not the case, and we don't have to care all that much about the report because the central government knows about all the facts. Now, from 9/28 to today, how many reports have you submitted to the Chinese government? I would like to take this question up with the government, with the administration. Well, as I have mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, we are still in the midst of doing our work, and after drafting the report, we will be giving you a copy for your perusal. As for the positioning of the report, I think the ministries in the central government and the people of Hong Kong, all sectors in Hong Kong, will be able to comment on that. But it is basically a fair and objective report reflective of reality. Can you please take that umbrella away? Is it a hindrance to colleagues? Why is it a hindrance? Do not walk out into the center. Do not do so. Next member, Ms. Emily Lau. Mr. Chairman, this public sentiments report is meaningless if the administration of Hong Kong dare not tell the central government that they do not reflect the 831 recommendation and the Hong Kong people want universal suffrage, and that the consultation for political reform be reopened because 831 does not reflect the common view of the Hong Kong people. And also it's mentioned here that there is occupation of roads starting end of September. But what about the 80-odd tear gas that were fired? Who ordered that to be done? Why is there no independent investigation? This is important as well. Will that be reflected in the report? Mr. Chairman, let me just congratulate Ms. Emily Lau for her successful election as the chairman. Please, Mr. Chairman, ask him not to waste time. Now, in the report, as I mentioned just now, for the 831 Standing Committee of the NPC, the public opinions concerning that, the public opinion surveys concerning the reception of the Standing Committee NPC's 831 pronouncements, that all these surveys will be reflected in the report. And also, the report will also incorporate major incidents since then, including the 28th of September happenings. And as I have mentioned, if it includes today, the report, then we would also include the clearing of the last site. Mr. Chairman, I'm asking very specifically tear gas. Will that incident be included? Well, everything that happened will be included into the report, Mr. Chairman. Ms. III.III. Mr. Chairman, I'm worried that the expectations from certain parties in Hong Kong concerning the public sentiments report is just too high. I've heard my colleagues, and I believe that the central government does understand the situation in Hong Kong, including the public opinion surveys, Ms. Emily Lau's point about the sentiments of the Hong Kong people concerning 831 recommendations. But the main point is that some people think that with the public sentiments report, the central government would know more about Hong Kong, and therefore they would want to rethink the 831 decision. And I think that is improbable because they have been thinking along the lines of one country concept. Now, Mr. Tam, I would like to know from you, do the central government officials know thoroughly the Hong Kong situation and the public sentiment here? And also for you, senior officers and the chief executive, you have occasions for meeting with the central government office.
Number 3, concerning the 831 decision, my understanding is that the NPCSC considered the issue from the standpoint of the concept of one country. It very much grasped people's sentiments in Hong Kong. So there's no question of changing its mind within a short term just because of the recent events. What's your understanding, Bureau Director? My personal experience is that not just CPG officials understand the sentiments of Hong Kong people, not just recently, but also in the past. Even provincial and municipal officials also understand this. When I attended this PRD conference, all the 9 provinces and 2 municipalities understood Hong Kong people's sentiments very much. And then the SARG has to be held accountable to the CPG via the CE. In particular, for such a major event, under the basic law, we're duty-bound to reflect public opinion to the CPG. Finally, Ms. Dari mentioned the A3 decision. The CS for administration, the S for J, and myself did say that we'll start the next step in the 5-step process for constitutional reform. So there's no question of restarting consultation. Mr. Tony Jia, Mr. Chairman, we're all concerned about this People's Sentiments Report. What will this report cover? And what's meant by related to our constitutional system? Is it that after this public sentiments report is completed, it will be submitted to the NPC immediately? Will you come to consult LegCo first? Number 1, this public sentiments report is not part of our constitutional process, as the Bureau Director said. And the Hong Kong FS said that the submission of this report would not help with reflecting Hong Kong people's sentiments. As the Bureau Director said, the CPG actually understands Hong Kong sentiments. So it seems that many people don't want to submit to this report. So what's your position? We've set out in paragraph 8 of the paper certain contents of that report, mainly in relation to incidents related to the constitutional developments since the 31st of August, the aspirations of different groups, and various opinion polls. The People's Sentiments Report is not a policy proposal, so we don't need to have any further public consultation. Number 3, this is not a constitutional procedure, of course, as clearly set out in our paper. Just now, Mr. Tony Jie heard my opening remarks. Our preparation work is still underway. We'll make an announcement where and when appropriate. Mr. Christopher Chung, concerning this public sentiments report, most members spoke on the Occupy Central movement. Will this public sentiments report cover the strong resentment for the movement? Although there are the silent majority, they've not been shown on our TV screens. But in fact, they constitute the majority of the public. I hope that their opinion can be included in the public sentiments report. Number 2, on the 21st of October, the trio met with the Hong Kong FS. And then this multi-platform for discussion and consultation was proposed. I'd like to know the ideas behind that idea. Will the second stage of the consultation on constitutional reform includes that platform? Mr. Chung mentioned the silent majority. I think in recent times, at least through 2 avenues, that will be reflected in our report. First of all, public opinion polls. Although they did not interview all 7 million people of Hong Kong, many of those polls were conducted by the academic sector. So we should be able to see some indications there. Number 2, we got signature campaigns. The results will also be recorded in the public sentiments report. As regards the platform, today I have nothing to add. Next, Mr. LegCoMembers. Thank you, Chairman. The emergence of the public sentiments report is, as we all know, the result of the meeting with the students. The administration would like to lay a foundation for dialogues. The administration would like to release sincerity, so to speak. So the situation since the 31st of August, aspirations expressed by different groups, and then opinion polls are covered in paragraph 8 of the paper. For the Bureau Director, in this report, will you add in government's description or assessment of the whole event since the 31st of August? Apparently, you won't add that content to the report, but can you confirm that? Ms. Emily Lau mentioned the 87 canisters of tear gas released in September. I don't think that's very special. That should definitely be included in the report. And just now some members said that many students had braved the law. Well, that happened to myself as well. So will all those be reflected in the report? Chairman, Mr. Ip mentioned the government's description of the whole incident. For this incident, if you're talking about the unlawful Occupy movement, it ended only this morning. On various occasions, the CE, the CS for administration, the S4J, and myself did mention our views. But our views may not be appropriate for this report because, as I said, this report should cover opinion of the public mentioned in recent times, including those collected from public opinion polls. So our own views will be for another occasion. We're still preparing our report. We'll bring councillors' views back for consideration. Well, SEMA, 6 more members would like to ask questions. You may have to stay for another 10 odd minutes. Is that all right? All right. Next, Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Mr. Chairman, the public sentiments report has not been written, but it seems that the mainland authorities had already formed their views. I read Wan Wei Pao, which report on Zhang Rongshun's views. He said that some people's knowledge of the basic law and the one country, two systems concept is different from what's on the mainland. So, Hong Kong people should learn afresh and forge consensus with the mainland views. I don't know what he meant. Obviously, Hong Kong people's views and judgment on the course of the umbrella movement are very different from those of mainlanders. If your public sentiments report is just a plain description and essay on those contents already reported in our newspapers, then it won't be very meaningful. Officials from the mainland should come to Hong Kong to understand the situation and analyze the situation. How will you explain in your report how different Hong Kong people's views are from mainlanders? Will you explain that difference to mainland officials and officials of the Hong Kong and Macau office? That is, what triggered the large-scale movement, whether or not you like it? Is also an unprecedented movement. How are you going to make your judgment and do your analysis? SEMA, I won't further comment on Mr. Zhang Rongshun's remarks yesterday. For this report, it will depict the people's opinion in recent times. And of course, there is a background and a time frame to that. We are 70 to 80% complete with our report and will continue to finish it. Ms. Chen Yunhan, I'd like to ask about 3 aspects. I agree with my colleagues that in recent times, the CPG actually understands our situation to a great extent. And this report will revive people's aspirations. So number 1, when will you complete the report? Number 2, whether you agree to it or not, society is divided into 2 or 3 or even more factions. Will you put forth all their views and ideas in the report? Number 3, should you not let us have a look at the report first before you submit it to Beijing? 3 questions, Secretary. Well, we've completed 70 to 80% of our work. We have to consider the overall timetable. Secondly, Ms. Chan mentioned different views in society. This report will cover views received from many avenues, including those collected from opinion polls. And for the third part of your question, when I answered Mr. Tony Jie's question, I already said that this is just a report on public sentiments, is not a submission of proposal. Well, let me ask you this. Apart from opinion polls, according to your observation, should the government broaden its consultation to listen to more views? I think you have sufficient time to do that. Should you not listen to more views? Bureau Director, if Ms. Chen Yunhan is talking about views on universal or constitutional reform, no. I was referring to the Occupy Central movement. Well, I think in the past 3 months or so, views expressed have been quite rich. And we're still gradually receiving more and more views. I think our report would be quite thick. Paragraph 5, number 3 of the paper mentions this multi-platform. The Hong Kong FS does not quite support that, but how will you go about it? And how will that be related to the second stage of your constitutional consultation? And then while you compile the public sentiments report, would you consider the views of overseas parliaments as well as views expressed by Hong Kong people overseas? Will you reflect all those in the report? Or how will you select what views to include and what not? Paragraph 5 of our paper sets out 5 specific responses which were set out by the CSO administration at her meeting with the Hong Kong FS. Here, I have nothing to add. As for overseas parliaments, Mr. Ma Fong Kok, this report is mainly to collect local views in the past few months. Overseas parliaments would not be covered by the report. But there is this situation that their voices had been reflected amongst protesters in Hong Kong. Such views had actually supported the movement. So would you include those views in the report? Bureau Director, if the views have affected the voicing of views in Hong Kong locally, we'll reflect them in the report. Still, I'd like to emphasize that this report is for local sentiments.
Mr. Wong Kwok Kim, Mr. Secretary, my this is for your consolation, because it's very difficult. This is a rather neither here nor there kind of a report, because the SAR to the central government, there is already the reporting line of the CE. For understanding the Hong Kong situation, the central government has the Hong Kong-Macau Affairs Liaison Office, widely gathering information and sentiment of Hong Kong. So obviously, this sentiment or public sentiments report is a measure so that the Federation of Students will find it easier to come down the stage, if you will. And so this is rather embarrassing now that you still have to be preparing this public sentiments report, because after all, what role does it play? It's neither here nor there, isn't it? What to do, Mr. Secretary? Thank you very much, Mr. Wong, for your consolation and your well-wishing. In fact, if you look at para 5, it's very clearly laid out that in the discussion with the Hong Kong FS, this has been raised by the Chief Secretary for Administration, and there are 4 points laid out, one of which is the public sentiments report. Even though times have changed and the situation has changed since we have already done 70 or 80% of the work, we will come out with this report, which will be coordinated with the timing of the second round of consultation. It is definitely true, as mentioned by members, that the central government is all in the know concerning the sentiments in Hong Kong. But since we have promised, we will continue to complete this public sentiments report. That's basically it. Mr. Chairman, this is not about the central government officials knowing the Hong Kong situation, but in fact, in paragraph 7, it's clearly stated by you that meanwhile, through different channels, the Central People's Government is in full knowledge of developments of Hong Kong since the decision was adopted by the NPCSC on 31st of August. You say in full knowledge of the developments in Hong Kong, and then in paragraph bracket 1, 2, and 3, the contents there, in fact, I would say more than 80% of that would be known by the central government through the media, through newspapers, etc. And given that, isn't this rather redundant, this report? As Mr. Wong had pointed out, you're doing it for the sake of doing it, and by so doing, aren't you wasting public money? Is it because your office has nothing better to do? Or in providing this report, you would want the central government to take a look at it and hopefully through understanding public sentiments make certain changes? Would that be the case? Mr. Chairman, let me reiterate myself. This public sentiments report, when it is submitted to the State Council, of course, what thinking they go through is up to them. But as mentioned very clearly in the paper, as I've mentioned just now, in our liaison with the central government officers and also with the officers from the different officials from the different layers and levels of government, they are in the know. They have full knowledge from the media, etc. But as mentioned just now, because we have already completed this work, this report, 70% to 80%, we are now trying to complete this report. But I've heard members asking and querying the purpose, the usage of this report. I will take this back and I will do more thinking in this regard. Mr. Chairman, from past experience, for any report from the administration in Hong Kong to the central government concerning political reform, it had been quite controversial. Different sectors have said that their views had not been fully reflected. My question to the Secretary then is, for the different public opinion surveys done by different institutes and organizations. What are the criteria for inclusion? That's one question. And on a micro level, for those surveys and public opinion studies made by the occupiers, would those be included? And also, would the report also include the views reflected in the different discussion zones or chat rooms in the internet? If not, how can this be said to be a reflection of public sentiments in Hong Kong? Mr. Chairman, concerning the what to include into the public sentiments report and the criterion or criteria thereof, well, basically it is the reports or public opinion reports from the public arena available to us, how the questionnaires were drafted and the survey were carried out. These are mainly from the think tanks done by the universities, the survey centers. Now, I do not have the finite list of the public opinion surveys. I will go back and look at how my colleagues are handling this concerning Martin's question. Now, for internet views and also chat rooms, and it will be very difficult to include those because some are membership-based, some are small groups, and also there are at certain instances loads of opinions uploaded. And I fear that those cannot be fully collected and reflected. And also some of the wording adopted on the internet are unfitting for reflection in the report. Some are obscene in nature. And so basically it is through public channels, media reflected surveys, public opinion surveys, and certain statements put forward. Yes, we will include those. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure that for any report, it will have to be reflective of reality, especially for this report, which pertains to the opinions of the people of Hong Kong concerning constitution reform and Occupy Central. And therefore, it has to be fair and reflective of reality. My question is, will this be avoiding the main issues, this report, basically just papering over the heavy or serious issues, and as a result of that, for the central government and for the Hong Kong administration, it is a failed report, because during the Occupy Central period, there were banners raised by occupiers asking for the stepping down of the CE. I do not know whether these sentiments will be reflected. If they are not, how can you say that this is reflective of reality? A lot of your colleagues say that Hong Kong people, especially the young people, do not understand the basic law, or they misunderstand the basic law, or they do not understand the decision of the NPC at 831, 31st of August. Well, I think teaching and learning are both important. Do you reflect the view that in the past period of time, the Hong Kong our government, even though they had put in a lot of efforts in educating the public about the basic law, but it's been deficient? Perhaps there had been deficiencies in the work of promoting or educating the public about the basic law. Would you be reflecting that as well? Mr. Chairman, concerning Mr. Lam Tai Fai's point, I will be going back to my office and will be talking to the colleagues to see whether this will also be included in the report. Yes, I will be reviewing the two areas concerned. Yes, Mr. Tam said that he will be here for half an hour, and indeed this is half an hour gone, and I'm sure Mr. Tam already knows the main points and of concern of my colleagues, so thank you very much. We now go to the next agenda item, which is the registration of voters for 2015, and Mr. Gordon Leung Chung Tai, Deputy Secretary for Constitution and Mainland Affairs, will be reporting on that. And this is the paper 435141503. Can you bring us through the paper, please, Mr. Leung? Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is about the 2015 campaign for registration of voters. In October of this year, the panel had discussed the 2014 figures for voters. And today we are introducing to you the voter registration efforts and campaign for 2015. This is a year for the district board election, and when it comes this kind of time, we will have a larger scale voter registration campaign to encourage those eligible to be able to register as voter before the 2nd of July of the year, and in this case 2015, and also before August 25th or before, to renew the relevant information of the existing registered voters. And also we very much will maintain the fairness, accuracy and transparency of the system for voter registration. As for the accuracy of the addresses of the registered voters, which had been elicited in the previous round of voting, we will remind the people of Hong Kong that at registration, the information provided will have to be accurate and true, and also addresses will have to be renewed where they need to be renewed. And in 2015, during the voter registration period, there will be relevant procedures, and if it is found that there is inaccurate information proffered by the voters, then we will follow up. Basically, in mid-May, the work for registration will commence, and the expenses will be about 50 million Hong Kong dollars. It will be a multi-pronged approach, encouraging different people of different age groups and backgrounds to register. We will have publicity campaign to increase the understanding of the public concerning registration, and also the ICAC in the process of registration will also ascertain that the information provided by the persons are accurate. I would now like to ask Mr. Lee Park Hong, the Chief Electoral Officer, Registration Electoral Office, REO, concerning the work of registration. Next year's objective is to encourage the eligible persons in Hong Kong to register as voters and the existing voters to renew their information, especially their new addresses. And under the electoral legislation, the time limit is slightly different from before. The new deadline is 2nd of July of 2015. Eligible persons will have to, before that date, make the registration so that their names will appear in the voters' register in September, and also be eligible to cast their votes in the district board elections. And the voters who have already registered need not register again, but before the 25th of August 2015, they will have to inform our office of any changes in their information, especially addresses, so they can be reflected in the registration or the registrar. And I urge that the public of Hong Kong do that early rather than to wait for the last minute to approach the office. And internally, there is a cross-departmental working group. The organization work is underway, and through the past experience of publicity campaign that we've had, we are planning the next round of publicity to encourage the eligible persons, irrespective of age, to register as voters. There are 3.5 million registered voters, which is 73.5% of the total eligible persons from 18 to 30 years of age. It is 60% registration. Compared to the other age groups, it is relatively lower. And as a result of this, the working group will focus on this age group to encourage more young people to register as voters to participate in future voting. We will also strengthen messages to the citizens of Hong Kong for their responsibility to provide accurate information to the office and to update their information. And the publicity campaigns are from paragraph 8 to 13.
The first category covers mass media and printing media, including APIs on TV, audio clips, display of advertisements on public transport to the 2 million households in Hong Kong, mailing of publicity leaflets, and the display of banners and posters covering the majority of the community and also different sectors of the community. For the second group, we'll use online media as well as search websites, news websites, apps for smartphones, electronic advertisements, and similar direct avenues to enhance the strength of our publicity materials. We'll also contact the younger persons, including those nearing the age of 18. We'll encourage them to register as electors. We'll set up booths to encourage those reaching adulthood to register. We'll also contact the senior secondary students. We'll also visit tertiary institutions and venues for large-scale community activities, as well as areas frequented by a lot of people to do publicity. For the new population intake, we'll remind electors to update their addresses. In September this year, an online voter information inquiry system was launched for the 2.6 million households. A publicity leaflet was sent together with the water tariff bills. You can see a copy of that in the annex. This is a more convenient avenue to facilitate electors to use online platforms to search their own particulars. They don't need to go to district offices personally to check the details. To cope with all these, the REO has earmarked $50 million for publicity. In the coming publicity cycle, we would like to attract more people to register as electors. So much for my introduction. Thank you. For the time being, I saw 4 hands. Mr. Chan Chi-chun, Charles Mok, Gary Fan, and Chang Lai Wan. Any more? You've got him. Starry Lee. Any more? No? No more? All right, 4 minutes each. Mr. Chan Chi-chun. Thank you, Chairman. My first question is asked on behalf of young people. The deadline for 2015 registration will be the 2nd of July. If a young person has not reached the age of 18, but by November, before the district council election day, he is 18 years old, can he register? Can he vote in this district council election? I heard that there would be a deadline in September. If that's the case, under what criteria was that line drawn? Secondly, the government said that it would like to absorb more young people to register as electors. That's one of your emphases. But for those between 18 to 20 years old, up to 200,000 such people have not yet registered. I'm worried that the government will not be prescribing the appropriate method to make use of publicity media for this publicity campaign, for the use of new media. In fact, they're not really new, like YouTube, the very popular online radio stations which are received by more young people than others. Magazines, new magazines, very much popular among young people. Will you make use of these media to place advertisements for registration? Young people don't watch traditional TV stations like HKTV, online TV stations. Would you make use of them for publicity? In the past, you dumped millions of dollars in TVB to launch a huge variety show and to have games, TV games. So you burnt a great deal of money in just a few hours without any market effect. Mr. Leung, I'll answer first, and my colleagues may supplement. For a registration cycle, before the statutory date, those people who are not reaching 18 can register. Take this year as an example. The statutory deadline for the publication of the register should be the 25th of September, if I remember correctly. In other words, on or before the 25th of September, those reaching 18 can register. That's the existing statutory provision. In the paper, it said that on the 25th of September, a formal register will be published. So Mr. Leung was saying that so long as on or before the 25th of September, the person reaches the age of 18, he can register and vote in the 2015 District Council election. Correct. The second question was what avenues we would make use of to do publicity so as to come into contact with young people. In the past few years, we did make use of new media like YouTube and online platforms visited very frequently by members of the public. We'll do the same this year. As for which websites would be better, I think we'll need to look at the patronage level. So you consider online radio stations and online TV stations. Well, for new media, we've not gone into such details yet. We're not going through each and every media yet. Oh, I'm not asking you for that detail yet. Where any new media would be considered. Any new online platform would be considered. Mr. Charles Mok, for this electoral registration system and publicity, you might have noted that all sorts of organizations have come forward in recent times to say that they would register. So what assistance will the government provide to them? Don't just give them a pile of forms for distribution on the streets. Will you be selective or will you be totally open? If the Hong Kong FS fetches you, will you help them? Or you will only help certain organizations? Can you tell us that you give equal treatment to all organizations? As for personal particulars, will you give them guidelines as to what can be done or should be done or otherwise? That is, the do's and don'ts. Well, sometimes they may be selling articles for making a profit or otherwise. So will you give them guidelines? And on what Mr. Chen Chi-chin said, I'd like to offer some supplementary remarks. You mentioned very, very traditional avenues which are not useful. You don't want to face the media that are popular among young people. We went to Taiwan and were told that they no longer play TV advertisements. They all made use of YouTube. You mentioned YouTube, but if you upload a video there, it may not be tantamount to advertising. Well, Facebook advertisements are also effective. Well, don't use WhatsApp. WhatsApp messages are very often rubbish. And today in Mingpao Daily, there's this article about a dedicated page on Facebook is written by Professor Fu Qinghua of Hong Kong U. A number of new websites are mentioned in that article, covering a number of social movements on either side. They're particularly useful in terms of media. They got very positive assessment for those independent media. For example, Hong Kong FS's Occupy Central Movement website, and then also daily newspapers, also pro-Beijing media that pay tribute to Hong Kong police. So will you make use of all of them for publicity, or will you be selective? Mr. Leung, I'll ask Mr. Lee to supplement in a moment. As far as I understand, if any organization would like to encourage more people to register as electors, we of course welcome their move. I believe if they go to the REO to ask for registration forms, I believe will help them as far as possible. Whether other forms of assistance will be provided, well, probably not, but everybody will be treated equally. We won't have differential treatment. If any organization tries to collect personal particulars under the excuse of elector registration, that should not be lawful, because under our laws, the objective of collecting personal particular must match what's said in the publicity materials. You should refer them to the guidelines. Number 3 is about new media. As we said just now, it depends on the patronage. For traditional media, we'll consider how many people come into contact with that particular media, because we're using public money, so we'll have to consider that factor. If some media have very strong political inclination, we'll also consider that factor. Mr. Gary Fan, sorry, Chairman, I have 3 to 4 questions. The first one is similar to Chan Chi-chun's. For publicity and promotion and placement of resources, you either have even distribution with different avenues. Another approach is target-oriented with overseas jurisdictions as a reference. Different age groups have different levels of enthusiasm in registration. Will you target a particular age group because the level of registration is low? And you can set objectives for different avenues, and you can make adjustments accordingly. Do you have such objectives? Well, from what I see in your paper, what you'll be doing will be similar to what you did in the past. And then for the first-time registers, they will have to get adapted to the new system. Will you target this group as well? As for internal assessment, in a Mayfu case recently, with 1 household with 7 family names and 13 electors. Well, before such cases were exposed by the media, would you be able to uncover such cases? And fourthly, Hong Kong people are really too busy with schooling, work, and so forth. And they may not know whether or not there are still electors after moving to another address. So will you have measures to facilitate people to check their registration status?
Mr. Chairman, if I can just respond to that, and then Mr. Lee can supplement. Now, Mr. Lee, when he first spoke, he talked about the voter registration campaign for this round. On the one hand, we are looking at all eligible persons, and at the same time we have certain focus. So in our work, we will be doing publicity in the mass media. Some members have talked about the traditional broadcast channels such as TV, radio, publications, and also transport, public transport, the body of public transport advertising. Now, these are basically targeted at all eligible persons in Hong Kong to encourage them to register as voters and not focus on any particular age group at all. As for the focus on certain age group, i.e. the younger persons, because they are less proportionately registered as voters, well, on that score, Mr. Lee had pointed out just now that we have a number of measures which will be focused on the young people. For example, when they turn 18, they have to apply for the adult ID card. We will have specific personnel facilitating them on the spot to register as voters. And also we will be going to the secondary schools as well as the tertiary education institutions, even though they may not be 18 yet, but we will remind them to register as voters. And also where there is more pedestrian flow, such as in shopping areas and MTRs, because young people do tend to go to these places. We will have booths or kiosks to facilitate registration, and at the same time we will have teams going to the housing estates or the residential developments to help them, the new residents, in registration as well. Mr. Lee, well, actually time is up. We'll have Ms. Zhang ask the question. Mr. Chairman, concerning the publicity in the MTR, newspapers, TV news, etc., publicity has been done. But very often when we see the older generation, they tell us that they were not interested in getting registered before, but in the past couple of years, because Hong Kong had become more political, or there are more political messages, and they are having seen the publicity, they're interested in getting registered. Now, if you're asking these aged people to go get the registration forms or to download from the forms from the internet, they may not be able to do so. As for the political parties, the old people are reluctant to give over their personal information to the political parties. Can you perhaps consider sending teams to help these old people to register directly? Now, you mentioned just now that there will be registration vehicles going to the different areas, including the housing estates. Will you be helping the old people to register on the spot? Mr. Lee? Yes. For the aged or for the older generation, yes. In the mass media, we also target them, encouraging them to register as voters. And where they need help, through the district offices and through the network of the offices, we will encourage and publicize to them and to assist them to register as voters. And we'll try our very best to do so. As for the registration vehicle, this is actually an ICAC publicity campaign, or part thereof. Basically, they are there to disseminate a clean election message. We will also look into whether these vehicles can help us distribute pamphlets or registration forms, so that more eligible persons who have not registered can be reached by this means. Now you talk about 1.5 million people. 3.5 million voters have been registered. It seems that that number had been stable for some time, and it's stagnated. Over the years, the government's publicity had not helped with the registration or the registered number of voters gone up. Well, hopefully, if you can tell the people where there will be help and assistance offered to them for registration, that will be best. And also, you mentioned in the paper that there are counters at the immigration to help the young people to register. Are you saying that you only help young people to register as voters? Do you not also help other persons, such as those who have newly moved to Hong Kong, to the new residents to register? Mr. Chairman, actually, all eligible persons, we will help all eligible persons at the Immigration Department as they apply for their new ID card. Oh, so the booth will not have a sign saying only to assist young people, because that's what you say in 12B, in paragraph 12B of your paper. Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, in the past, for most of the registration forms that we collect from the immigration officers, it is these young people who have gone up to fetch their ID card or apply for their adult ID card. But of course, we will also assist other persons as well. Mr. LegCoMembers, it's very clear from the paper that there will be this new round of campaign, and the 2nd of July will be a deadline. After that deadline of 2nd of July 2015, they will have to wait for the next round of voter registration campaign. Well, I think this is also a publicity measure. Mid-May or before, or even starting now, all the way to the 2nd of July, Hong Kong people are able to register. Is this correct? I mean, we should disseminate that message, isn't it? Rather than to have some people think that, oh, they will have to wait till mid-May before they can register as voters, and that is not the right understanding, is it? And secondly, there are people who would like to search whether they have been registered. I think this is possible. They can do so on the internet. Will you, in the next round, where you have these opportunities, publicize to the Hong Kong people, the Hong Kong public, that there is this channel for internet search? And if you can give guidelines and procedures to facilitate them, should they want to do so. And another question concerning those who are working in the mainland and living in the mainland. These Hong Kong residents do come back to Hong Kong from time to time, but because of their address, because of their place of work being in the mainland, well, actually there are some who have mainland addresses, but in fact they come to Hong Kong. They actually work in Hong Kong. What about these people? Perhaps these people can register as voters or not? Can you please clarify? Mr. Lee, please. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, for voters registration, there are two key dates. One is the 2nd of July. This is for new registrations deadline. For those eligible, they will have to register before that deadline. So I call upon the eligible people in Hong Kong not to wait till the last day, but say tomorrow, the day after, or the first quarter, second quarter of 2015, they can do so. The second date is the 25th of August, and that is for renewal of information. If there is any change of information, such as moving to a new address, then the new information will be informed to us, our office, before that date, 25th of August. Thirdly, concerning the persons searching for his status concerning voter registration, there are three main methods available. One, the person involved can go to the district office and to search the voters register to see whether he's on the register and to see whether some information need to be changed. Secondly, he can call up our electoral hotline. This is more convenient. Just making a phone call will do, but it will have to be done. The phone call will have to be done within office hours. And in my initial introduction, I said that there is an online check as well. So people of Hong Kong need not be limited by the office hours. At any time of day, they can search whether they are on the register as voter and also whether there's any information they need to renew. And if indeed they need to do so, they can do that online as well. So it's much more convenient. A third point concerning certain voters or citizens of Hong Kong, because of personal reasons, because of work or study, or they are living in the mainland. And in the past, the panel, and whether the secretary or other colleagues have also clarified the same many times. And there are two main points of consideration. And that is, a voter will have to be ordinarily resident in Hong Kong, and also there will have to be an address in Hong Kong for registration. So this is about the nexus with Hong Kong, whether there is still a certain nexus or relationship with Hong Kong for this person concerned. And this person will have to know Hong Kong and will have to have certain nexus with Hong Kong before he is to be registered as voter. So we will be looking at individual cases to see the reason for the person coming to Hong Kong, why has he left, and whether he'll be coming back to Hong Kong, and whether in Hong Kong he will have a residential address as the registration address for voter registration. This is a legal issue as well as an issue pertaining to reality of things. Yes, Ms. III.III. Even though the administration had time and again said that the citizens of Hong Kong should not wait till the deadline, but should do that early. But very often it is after the fact, after the deadline, that the voters find out that they have missed the mark. And some of them have also missed the deadline for changes of information. So I would think it is also, apart from encouraging them to register as voters, tell them that they are not eligible for district board's election if they miss the deadline. I hope you will include that message as well, and also to remind them to verify their information as voters. In the past, we have found that over hundreds of thousands of citizens' registration had to be cancelled because they never reviewed, never confirmed their information, and at the end of the day they were barred from voting, and that's very unfair for them. So hopefully you can include that into your message as well. And further, since you have these mobile vehicles for publicity and registration, especially in densely busy areas of city. So in fact, for the confirmation of voter ID is very simple. All you need is an iPad which has internet access. So perhaps you can, your colleagues in publicity can at the same time confirm and verify the ID of the voters. So it is not just for registration as voters, for the work of these counters, but also for the verification of the fact that they are on the register.
Mr. Lee? Thank you, Chairman. Just now, Ms. III.III. mentioned a few points which will be included in our publicity work. I can summarize those into 3 points. We have to remind all eligible electors to lodge an application before the deadline. Number 2, existing electors must make sure that they've updated their latest personal particulars. Number 3, it's also very important that new and old electors must provide accurate information. That's also very important. Just now, members also asked whether at our mobile registration stations we could also immediately verify certain particulars. Well, we'll try to see whether there's room for us to do more. Mr. Chairman, I strongly urge them to include that function. You've got a sum of money for publicity. It depends on where you place it. This involves all Hong Kong electors. You have to remind them to verify their personal particulars as well as register as electors. Mr. James Chen, we got a population of 7 million people, and half of them, 3 odd million people, are eligible electors, and on the election day, 2 odd million may cast their votes. Once these people are registered, in future, they can vote in the CE election, thus making the CE more recognized with an enhanced public mandate. So many councillors and political parties have urged the government to do all this and to do this and that because they would like their supporters to register as electors and then later turn out to support them. Why don't you consider the Singaporean and Australian models? In Hong Kong, those with an identity card with 3 asterisks, they should be registered automatically as electors. Why should they register again? If they don't get the 3 asterisks, they won't be considered permanent resident of Hong Kong. So immediately you have 3 million electors. In Singapore, they have a voting population of 5 million people. Singapore and Australia have their own methods supported by their respective public. And in Hong Kong, we can immediately get 5 million electors. The government does not have to spend so much money. And we councillors don't need to do so much to encourage our supporters to come out to register. During an election, all those reaching the age of 18 will be eligible electors automatically. Why doesn't the government consider this? There are 2 issues here. Even if you don't want to have a mandatory voting system, at least you should have an automatic registration system. Why don't you consider these 2 options? Mr. Leung, as Mr. Tian mentioned, there are 2 issues here: automatic or mandatory registration and mandatory voting. In fact, in the past, on many occasions in this panel and on other occasions, we received similar suggestions and we did consider them. As for mandatory voting, we believe it will take a great deal of discussion in society as to whether or not we should embark on that route. For those there are not that many jurisdictions that have mandatory voting. Most of them have automatic registration. For automatic or mandatory registration, our existing system is a voluntary registration system. We respect the freedom of any person not to register as an elector. If we are to change that, we need to discuss in society. Another factor should be considered. In Hong Kong, for our registration system, electoral registration system, the applicant has to provide his address, and that's up to the elector himself to do so. In certain jurisdictions, they have a household system with a higher degree of accuracy in terms of addresses. But in Hong Kong, we don't have a household registration system. So if an elector has to provide his address or to update his address, the present voluntary system is more desirable. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, I'm also asking about paragraph 6. In the latter part of paragraph 6, you said that you would verify information and check information with establishments like the Housing Department, the Hong Kong Housing Society, and the Housing Authority and Home Affairs Department. But you mentioned random checks only. In 2011-2012, such cases, there were many such cases in the DC election, not so many in the LegCo election. Buildings were demolished. Still, we had electoral addresses in those buildings. The 2015 District Council election is coming. We received most complaints from DC elections. Why can you not carry out a carpet-style checking? Why should you still have random checking? Nowadays, we have commercial buildings. You can actually discover those electors who register the address of the water meters as their address. Well, in fact, in some cases, we're able to do 100% check, but on other occasions, we can only have random checks. Mr. Lee, well, there are two major types here. One is random check. That is, we check only when we have suspicion. The other category involves demolished buildings or addresses of water meters, as well as addresses with letters bounced letters. After 2012, this has become an annual exercise, not just this year, but last year and also the year before last. We have to strike a balance. Our past experience tells us that if all checks are random, the electors had a negative impression of the exercise, which they found a nuisance. Theoretically, we have to strike a balance under our legal system. We cannot say that once we have suspicion or doubts, then we'll check. Anyway, if an address is doubtful, we'll try to confirm the address as the residential address of the elector before we can allow him to register. In the coming year, we'll only enhance our strength in checking. For example, those electors living in housing estates under the Housing Society and the Housing Authority will carry out a comprehensive check. That will be a comprehensive check. If we discover discrepancies, we'll ask the electors concerned to provide the latest information to help us with updating. If no further particulars are submitted by the electors, we can consider cancelling their eligibility. Well, of course, you have to check with the Housing Society and the Housing Authority. You have to check the demolished buildings. But what about one household with many family members and many electors? Those are suspicious cases. And then you should have completed all non-residential buildings. I think Mr. Sin Chung Kai's understanding is correct. In 2012-13, our own colleagues inspected the addresses. For addresses that look like a commercial address or non-residential address, we'll check. Say if a person says that he's living in a shop, he do business in front and reside at the back of the premises. Anyway, we would like to have reinspection. So every year we'll review certain cases. Next, Mr. Yu Siwing. Mr. Chairman, apparently publicity on this electoral registration campaign is more or less the same as before. Well, I'm now offering some opinion which may have already been adopted by the administration. Take, for example, you can collaborate with owners' corporations, elderly centers, social services centers, etc. If a building or a community center so consent, the government can distribute leaflets here and offer some explanation. They can even help with registration. As for avenues of leaflet distribution, in the past, apart from on-street distribution and distribution through the media, have you considered other avenues? For example, in the morning, you have many elderly people in the parks. And then very early, say by 9 a.m., they will have left. So will you distribute more publicity leaflets there? Number 3, for overseas eligible persons, usually they can only register locally. We understand that many Hong Kong people reside in 2 different jurisdictions, say in Hong Kong and on the mainland, or in Hong Kong and in Macau. In the past, you did not do publicity among them. Will you collaborate with fraternity organizations or certain societies or clan societies and so forth for publicity? Mr. Lee, you asked whether we visited district organizations like MACs and OCs. In actual fact, in the coming cycle, through the network of district officers, we would like to disseminate the message to these organizations in the hope that they can do publicity in their respective buildings. As for elderly centers, we have to go back and consider further, because we have to find collaboration avenues with these centers to do publicity. We'll consider all effective avenues. So we'll go back and consider whether we can do more in that regard. Besides, at the local community level, the honorable member mentioned parks. Let me use young people as an example. At the moment, we target places frequented by young people. For example, upcoming will have a youth orchestra marathon. We'll set up mobile publicity booths to help with publicity. And in the past, we did make use of recruitment premises for civil service recruitment. We also have itinerant registration stations to assist with voter registration. Particularly in busy areas, we would like to set up registration booths and counters to assist in public registration. As for overseas publicity, our thinking at the moment is like this. Under the ordinance, a person must have a major residence in Hong Kong and be residing in Hong Kong ordinarily before he can register as an elector. So we'll focus on local eligible persons. As for overseas persons, we have to examine each and every case individually. But that won't be our major target for the time being. Ms. Claudia Mo. Thank you, Chairman. Over 90% of the population of Hong Kong are Chinese, so very naturally we use Chinese more. But I'm a bit worried. At least you should have Chinese and English in your publicity materials. Just now, I tried to surf your online website, but in vain. Probably that's because of my own iPad. It's not your fault. But for mobile vans, I won't expect you to have English and Chinese in the ratio of half-half. But at least some publicity materials must be published not just in English also, but in Nepalese and other languages. If they're not conversant with Chinese, our official language, if they are not conversant with English, the other official language, then they won't be able to understand your publicity materials. For the Nepalese, it's very common that they have stayed in Hong Kong for 3 generations. And for young people just arriving in Hong Kong, Chinese and English may be secondary in terms of usefulness. You should provide materials in their native language.
Yes, they'll be very grateful if you provide this information in the language, because for a lot of government information disseminated, such as during the SARS period, the racial minority did not know what was happening at all, because if they didn't understand English or Chinese, then they wouldn't know what was happening. And finally, it was actually through printing of minority language pamphlets that they were finally informed. Can we have this unison, please? I mean, and also, can we also to take care of the linguistic needs of the Urdu-speaking or Nepalese-speaking population in Hong Kong? Well, Mr. Chairman, all along for our publicity work for voter registration, and the materials are all in Chinese and English. That is the first point. So whether in English or Chinese, for registration forms and for verification of information, both languages are available. As for the racial minority, Mr. Lee can supplement. We also have certain measures to help them understand the requirements and also to allow them to know the work concerning registration as voters. Yes, as mentioned just now, for the publicity information, they will definitely be in both languages, Chinese and English. As for the racial minority, we have 7 languages focused on them to provide information concerned voter registration. We have met with cases where these persons actually did not come across the publicity information but approached us directly to be registered. And in our communication with them, there were difficulties. And for the unison under the Christian group, we have an interpretation service to help the relevant people who need such assistance to help them register as voters and help them understand the work. Emily Lau? Yes. 2 points, spot checks. And a couple of years ago, we have taken out, I believe, 200,000 registered voters because they were found to be dubious in their identity. But I've heard that some people do not like being spot checked. But of course, I think it is very effective. And in fact, we said that you should do this on an annual basis. I'm sure some people do not like this, and some people would actually say, do not register us if this has to be the case, but they belong to the minority. And also for those who reside outside, overseas, we do not encourage them to come back to Hong Kong to vote, but there are those who live in the mainland. But when it comes time, there will be these buses busing them to Hong Kong to cast their votes. And what about these? Well, in 2012, yes, after checking, we have taken out 210,000 voters, cancelled their registration. And in the future, how do we go about it, given the registration cycles? In fact, for the spot checks and for focused measures, we want to have a balance between the two. In the 2012 experience, it is because some of the voters have not provided us with the new addresses, and therefore we have cancelled their registration. And this is rather unnecessary. In the future, if we know that the addresses may be problematic or this is not their usual residence, then through the normal legal procedure, we can look at whether they can renew or allow us to renew their registration information for them. And during the election year, we will definitely step up with this kind of work. And for those who are already resident overseas or in the mainland, I've already answered that question, and that is, under the law, it is very clear that the person will have to be normally resident in Hong Kong to be a voter. And secondly, the person will have to provide an address in Hong Kong for registration. There is no room for any flexibility at all. Now, what is normally resident in Hong Kong? Majorly, if a person has left Hong Kong, for what purpose, for how long, and whether he'll be coming back to Hong Kong, whether there is any nexus in Hong Kong, whether he owns property in Hong Kong, whether he has family members in Hong Kong, all these are relevant. So every case is unique, and there are variances in every case. So we have to look into each and every one of them. Whether these persons are eligible to vote in Hong Kong, that will depend on the situation. Because if they are not qualified and not eligible, then they must not cast a vote. Otherwise, they'll be contravening the law. Well, how are they to know? Because some of them are old people. And I mean, you will have to understand this. They will not know about their own qualification and eligibility. Let us not make it confusing for the people. And what is the percentage of checking for this year? Well, over 1.5 million. Which is more or less the same as the 2012 scale. And after 2013 and 14, this, I believe, is a acceptable scale of checking. As for those living overseas or in the mainland, it is very difficult to say one-off whether they are eligible or not eligible, because it really depends on the case. If we just tell them that they are under such circumstances eligible or not eligible, then we run the risk of falling foul of the law. And if a person is not clear as to his eligibility, they should come to us to check and verify. Because we do not know in certain cases. We have to go to the DOJ to clarify in certain cases. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask a question. For the proportion between spot checking and bounced mail instigated investigations or checking, what is the ratio between the two? Or for the latter, if there had been complaints or tip-offs from people? Well, for 1.6 million voters, we will be focused, and as I've mentioned, we will be working with the Housing Department and the Housing Authority to look at 1.5 million voters. What do you mean, 1.5 million voters? This is random sampling? No, working with the two authorities, as I have mentioned, to verify the registration and eligibility of those living in the housing estates. Oh, so these are cooperation with the Housing Authority and the relevant government departments to see whether there are irregularities concerning the registered voters. And you said that 1.6 million is the total number of such spot checking. Not all live in these housing estates under the government institutions or departments. Maybe half only. Why are you only spot checking such a small amount if you look at the number of residents in these housing estates? Well, in 2012, after the measure, we have done a review. For random sampling checking, we do not have a basis to say that the voter registration information is incorrect, because the registration and voting are rights protected by law. And we will have to look at the actual situation. When we started this measure of spot checking, we were responding to public worry or concern about the accuracy of information in the register. And therefore, we have come up with this checking. Now, Mr. Chairman, there is a question. For those living in the property, as you have mentioned just now, they are 50% over 50%, and the rest of the random sampling are those people which are very difficult to find. Let's say if a person does not live in my unit, my public housing unit, and in that public housing unit that has only one resident, and that is me. But there is another person registered with my address, and that's easy to spot, isn't it? Those are easy to spot. There are those which are very difficult to find. I mean, a ordinary property, a flat with 48 residents living in the same flat, or there's a dismantled building and it's the registered address is still that dismantled building, then all these should be inaccurate. So I think your approach is wrong. If there is a person who says he will not be a registered voter because of fear of being subject to spot check, then he should not register at all. Ms. Regina Ip. My question is, what about civil servants? Do you have a simple notice sent to them, reminding them of their civic responsibility? I think you should. I'm sure you do. And secondly, concerning the different groups, the new immigrants, for example, the racial minorities, in fact, they have a lot of organizations. The Pakistani, the Indian have a lot of groups, commercial groups, etc. And then there are the pan-democrats. They have their organizations for the new immigrants. And then there are the immigrants based on talent and criteria. They have their organizations as well. Do you approach them? Do you reach them? And for those Hong Kong people who are resident in the mainland coming back to Hong Kong to cast their vote, what's wrong with that? I mean, according to common law, a person can have a few residences that he as his normal or regular residence, as long as a person has certain relatives or friends in Hong Kong and comes back from time to time and have nexus still with Hong Kong, then I think it is fine for them to come back and vote. For the older people, residents in the mainland, they have family in Hong Kong still and friends. As for 60 in your paper, encourage registered voters, or rather, the Immigration Department. I'm sorry, I'm looking for the paragraph. I think it is 11C. It says that with the cooperation with the Immigration Department and with the public cell, the Hong Kong Persons Agreement, there will be an update of the relevant information in the register. How does this actually work? First of all, concerning the civil service, yes, for every cycle, we would call on the civil servants where they're eligible to register as voter, and we will continue to do so. As for the racial minorities, and as I have responded to members, we have certain messages targeted at racial minorities through the non-government institutions for them to register as voters. Thirdly, for those who are residing in the mainland, voters who come back to Hong Kong for voting, I myself have no problems with this, as long as the voter continue to has a normal residence in Hong Kong, then that is fine. As for the cooperation with the Immigration Department, very often the Immigration Department will have this stipulation, and that is for a citizen where the personal information had changed, they should go to the immigration for changing the relevant data. For example, his marital status has changed, and he should go to change his the relevant information with the Immigration Department. Now, in the registration form, there is an item whereby the applicant will provide his latest information to the registration office for update of his voter information registration. And every year we have about 20,000 such forms sent to us to update the, let's say, the address of the voters. Now for the racial minorities.
Mr. Liu, you said that you would do it via NGOs like the Unison. But then there are new avenues as well. You should be more aggressive. There are various new organizations. For example, the talents from the mainland, they have their own websites as well. So you should be more enterprising. Don't just stick to the conventional avenues. Dr. Kokaki, we're on voter registration. Yes, I know, Chairman. We're talking about two issues. Just now, you answered our colleagues' questions about those who've resided on the mainland for a long time. You did not give us a certain piece of information. That is, the Immigration Department actually had information on the departure and return of these people. If these people reside on the mainland for most of their time, like 90 or 95% of their time, then according to our common sense, they do not actually participate in community activities. Have you ever done anything in that regard? If not, why? Mr. Lee? Chairman, I mentioned those electors who have resided on the mainland. Their particulars vary a great deal. Even if we have the information from the Immigration Department, we have to understand under what circumstances these people have moved to the mainland. If an elector has moved to the mainland on a long-term basis, we have to understand the reason. Illnesses, schooling, or whatever. Now, all these are related considerations. Say if a person is totally disconnected with Hong Kong, then we have to ask a question. Can this person still be defined as being ordinarily residing in Hong Kong? So we have to know all these specifics for consideration before we can pass a judgment on whether or not this elector is still eligible as an elector and should be eligible for voting in an election. Mr. Lee, I asked you whether you have the information. Just tell me, within the Immigration Department, do they have information about those people who are residing on the mainland on a long-term basis? You mentioned schooling and illnesses. Just tell us what reasons are rational reasons and which are not. Say no reason is given to you, that person is just residing on the mainland on a long-term basis, not because of schooling, not because of illnesses. do you have a principle to follow? There are two principles. First of all, this elector must be ordinarily residing in Hong Kong. He's not then, and he has a residence in Hong Kong. He doesn't have. So failing those two criteria, that person can no longer stay on the voter register. Now, this is a complicated legal issue. If you want me to simplify the whole issue into just two categories of eligible or non-eligible, then I'm not really in a position to do so. And this cannot be handled in just a couple of days. Legal issues must be put in front of the S4J for advice. Unless and until we get a court reference, we cannot treat our decision as a piece of legal information. For those who are not residing ordinarily in Hong Kong, will you send a reminder on eligibility? And what about one household with 12 family members, for example? Did you proactively conduct an investigation? That question was asked. Yes, I heard that. Maybe we shouldn't spend time on repetition. Mr. Lee, just be brief. Yes, I'll be brief. We'll continue to investigate into cases of one household with multi-family names. Dr. Kwok put forth certain views on those residing on the mainland. In fact, the particulars available to us may be personal data and may not be helpful in terms of voter registration. Well, we have to hurry on. We're seriously behind schedule. Next item, access to information, follow-up actions to the recommendations of the Ombudsman's Direct Investigation Report. We still have the Deputy Secretary with us, Mr. Gordon Leung, and then he also has another colleague, Ms. Fadaya Sam, the Principal Assistant Secretary. Deputy Secretary, anything you would like to tell us in terms of introduction? Thank you, Chairman. In March of this year, the Ombudsman published a direct investigation report in relation to access to information in Hong Kong. As a background, I'd like to inform members that the Code on Access to Information has been applied to all bureaus and departments since 1996. In accordance with the Code, the government would release certain information to members of the public that are checking the information, save for very special reasons that prohibit disclosure. In 2009, the Ombudsman already carried out a direct investigation and made some recommendations. In the main, the then Ombudsman observed that the effort spent on the code by the government was quite effective. All along, over 97% of the applications in accordance with the code were satisfied. So our effort has been quite effective. In 2009, the Ombudsman published a direct investigation report which carries certain recommendations to deepen the past recommendations in terms of personnel training, publicity, and education. All those recommendations were implemented. In 2013, the Ombudsman carried out another direct investigation. The starting point of that exercise was to review other jurisdictions in terms of access to information. He tried to do a comparison between Hong Kong and those jurisdictions. And then in March 2014, certain recommendations were put forth. I'll go through those recommendations quickly. If I may refer members to Annex B From the horizontal table, you'll see the recommendations and the latest position. The Ombudsman's major recommendations include the following. The government should consider legislating on access to information to provide a legal basis for the regime. Under the LRC, there is a working group studying the subject. So given today's progress, we would like to await a report from that working group before we work on the future direction. Beyond legislation, the Ombudsman also says that before legislation, the administration should enhance on several fronts the existing measures. If I may refer you to Annex B to the paper. Starting from item 2, you can see those recommendations, and we've also given you the latest position. In terms of oversight, the Ombudsman recommends that the government should explore ways and means by which bureaus and departments can have access to authoritative expert advice and clear guidelines on handling information requests that appear to involve personal data. In that regard, we've already taken action together with the S4J, and bureaus and departments have already got clear guidelines now. The Ombudsman also suggests that we set up an independent body to advise the Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Bureau, the CMAB, on matters relating to ATI. After the LRC has completed a study, we'll take this on board. Because when we referred to other jurisdictions, we observed that very seldom or rarely did they have such independent bodies, unless certain aspects are related to legal issues. So we'll await a report from the LRC. Besides, the Ombudsman also suggests that we expand the applicability of the regime. Well, under the Ombudsman, there are 22 public bodies. We followed up with them and reviewed their policies and report arrangements for access to information. We hope that under the code, as well as internal disclosure arrangements, the two can be as close as possible. The relevant work is already underway. As for public bodies beyond the purview of the Ombudsman, should we put them under a public system? We also believe that we should await a report from the LRC. The reason is that the working group under the LRC, when studying other jurisdictions, has to consider an important aspect. That is the scope, the scale of coverage. That's a major point of consideration. And then may I go to point 5 in that annex. The Ombudsman recommends that the government should review its definition of information request. We've already conducted the review. We've also studied the practices of other jurisdictions and came to the conclusion that the existing arrangement is appropriate. As regards enhancement of transparency, the Ombudsman said that we should release more information to the public. We should consider introducing disclosure locks so as to facilitate the public's understanding and scrutiny of the performance of bureaus and departments. We are discussing this with relevant bureaus and departments. We would like to implement this recommendation by phase. Another point mentioned by the Ombudsman is that the government should significantly increase the amount, breadth, and quality of information that it regularly provides to the public about the code and its application. In this regard, we are in the process of implementing the recommendation. In our paper, we also mention that we have uploaded information in this regard in relevant websites. And we also publish quarterly statistics regularly. So we got enhancement in this regard and will continue to make improvement in this regard to let members of the public understand the implementation of the code.
Number 8, the Ombudsman made an observation that there should be a periodic review of the code so that it is in keeping with the times, and also all the exemptions are in keeping with the actual situation and are still applicable. And in our work, this is also one of their main areas of focus, and we have also looked at overseas jurisdictions where they have in their system exemptions, and the content of such exemptions is something that is being studied as well here. So after the study had been completed, we will consider what to do for the future. And also, the Ombudsman had also made the recommendation that the government should compile a list of case studies so that the policy bureaus, departments, and the members of the public of Hong Kong will be able to understand more clearly the execution of the implementation of the code and what are some of the areas to pay attention to. Now, we have already done that. For the cases which have been handled by the Ombudsman, we have already accepted them and put them into our website. And there are two other points. The Ombudsman had made the suggestion that we step up with publicity so that the people of Hong Kong would know what channels are available for them to find out about the code. And we will definitely be doing this in the future and doing publicity to promote this kind of information. Compared to other departments and policy bureaus, there should be more support and guidelines for them concerning the codes, in particular for the exemptions and the relevant reasons thereof. We are to provide staff training to the relevant bureaus and departments, and we have already done that actually. Now, overall speaking, the government at this stage, for the work that can be implemented, we have already put them into place. And the study by the LRC is ongoing, and after the study had been completed, based on the results, we will follow up with other improvements and works that we need to take up. Thank you very much for the introduction. We have 6 members who have raised their hands. Mo Manching, Lam Chi Chun, Sin Tong Kai, Chang Lai Wan, and Stanley Mok. Now, this meeting is supposed to end at 5 o'clock, and that's very difficult to have everybody speak within that time. 3 minutes each. Ms. Claudia Mo, please. Yes, we want there to be freedom of information, and this is not just to benefit the news reporters or the media, but for everyone concerned, their rights to information, such as hospital medical information. Right now, they can deny the access to such information. We heard that there are codes and there are certain information instances where the accessibility to the information will be denied. For example, the reporters would call up GIS. The GIS would drag on for a long time and then at the end of the day come back and say, sorry, sensitive, cannot provide the information to you. And then we heard the administration saying 97% of the people making inquiries under the present code, all of them or some of them are able to obtain the information. Now this is playing a game with the figures. I mean, I have asked you 10 questions. If you answer 1.5 questions of mine, then you can say you have answered the questions, but that is not the whole truth. Now, you have mentioned, I don't know how many times, the LRC, LRC this, LRC that, but basically this is about before there is a legislation for freedom of information. We have an independent body to look at the code and its implementation. But you're saying that well, let us wait for the completion of the study of the LRC and to consider that altogether. Well, that amounts to doing nothing. The LRC and the study, is there a timetable for that? When does the administration think that they will complete the study? When will you be legislating? When will there be a ordinance for freedom of information? Perhaps I should provide another statistics. 97% of the persons seeking the information would have all or partial satisfaction of their search. 96.2%. In 96.2%, all the information sought is provided to the person seeking the information, and the rest did not, and for the rest of the cases, did not get full satisfaction for the searching of the information. So 96% are completely satisfied in getting the information. Now, the LRC had been already doing their study for some time, and they've also been looking at other jurisdictions' practices as well. I do not have a timetable. The meetings are still proceeding. The study exercise is still ongoing. Perhaps after the meeting I can come back with the timetable. Mr. Chairman, there are over 100 jurisdictions in the world with codified or legislation protecting the people or citizens in getting information. Now, I see that the administration is dragging their feet. I mean, the administration is very powerful. For the new territories northeast, they can do that without the urban planning, town planning board's blessing. And for other incidents also do not need the relevant to go through the relevant procedures. Sexual persuasion, discrimination is now also thrown into the LRC, and we have no idea when it's going to come out on the other side of the process. That is to say, this is another one of these, the Ombudsman's recommendations. And it seems that there is no question put to the LRC as to when they'll complete their work. The LRC suggests that even where there is no legislation, there should be an independent body. And it was mentioned just now that there are no other jurisdictions with that kind of a body. But that is because they already have the laws. You're not only using LRC as a shield, but also the LegCo, because the LegCo is also mentioned concerning our making information accessible and open. Now, this is a separation of powers. As the executive, you are not going to tell us or tell us as to what we should do at the LegCo concerning the availability of our information. And the powers here is different from other public bodies. Isn't that true? Mr. Chairman, first of all, on the question of the completion of work of the LRC, the timetable, as I have responded to Ms. Claudia Mo's question, the study is still ongoing at the LRC Working Committee. when will they complete their work? Perhaps I can provide the same information after the meeting, after asking the RRC. You're saying that you will ask the RRC? Yes, I will. As for public bodies, I basically just pointed out that in overseas experience, for different jurisdictions, there are different ways of approaching it, and the coverage is different. And for some of them, they cover even the courts as well. Some are lesser in coverage, and so there is a big variance. According to my understanding, for overseas experience, where they have a open information or accessibility to information ordinance, they have to consider the expenses as well. There will have to be a lot of resources to handle these cases. There are basically only 22 public organizations are covered. Well, we have talked to or communicated with the public bodies. Basically, the government code is being referred to and a comparison done to look at their own public information guidelines to see basically to compare the two, and where there are variants, we will see whether there are certain ordinances under which these public bodies operate, and it denies them the ability to publicize the information or make available the information. Sin Chung Kai? Well, it says here the public organizations include a number of different organizations, statutory bodies, etc. Now, my question is, what about mainland central government offices in Hong Kong, such as the Liaison Office and other so-called external forces referred to by the mainland, such as the imperialistic U.S. and U.K., their representative offices in Hong Kong? Would this include these organizations as well? If not, will the administration also include these into the study? The LRC's work is really to look at the system as it is practiced in Hong Kong. And of course, it is based on the existing access to information situation in Hong Kong. And basically, the access to information covers only public organizations, that is, government organizations. No, you have not answered my question. The question is, will the administration ask the LRC in the stage of legislation also include the Central Liaison Office in Hong Kong and other external forces organizations in Hong Kong? No, Mr. Leung, you have already answered the question, but he doesn't understand. Can you please repeat your answer? As I have mentioned, this is only applicable to Hong Kong government public organizations, and this is the basis. As for looking at other jurisdictions' experience, their legislation or ordinances on access to information, of course, in the study, they'll look at overseas experience as to how they implement these codes or ordinances. The coverage for those jurisdictions may cover other public bodies other than government bodies, but it will have to be relevant to the jurisdiction situation as well. Some of them are semi-statutory bodies or business bodies.
Yes, Ms. Emily Lau. Mr. Chairman, we've been discussing Code of Access to Information for 20 years. Back then, I was even suing the new China News Agency. We asked for an archive law as well. Now, when we asked for archives, you told us that the archives had been destroyed. So, there's no way we can have access to those information. I'd like Mr. Leung to clarify whether or not the LRC is already looking into this. Well, many LRC reports were left unattended. In fact, the administration has no intention of allowing members of the public to have access to information in an orderly manner. And this code is actually useless. Many members of the public complained about bureaus and departments. Things are getting more and more complicated. It becomes more and more difficult for us to have access to information. Mr. Leung, concerning the archive law, is the administration wing of the CGO that's responsible for this. In fact, the LRC took the initiative to compile 2 reports. One is on the system for access to information. Another one is about how we should go about government archives, and the administration wing is still following up on the latter. That's why today we're not reporting on behalf of the administration wing. Concerning the access of information regime, since 1996, we've been abiding by the code. Right from the beginning, the code makes it clear that the administration should, as far as possible, provide information to the public. That's the fundamental principle of the code. That's why just now I explained to members that over 96% of public requests for access to information were entertained. Only 1% of requests were rejected. These 2 figures add up to more than 97%. Therefore, the existing access to information regime has... Well, Mr. Leung, I understand your arguments. But if you really want members of the public to have freedom of information, you really need a piece of legislation on access to information, and you must have a piece of archive law. Otherwise, in future, we don't know where to get information. Dr. Chang Lai-wen, I'd like to seek clarification on this. Ever since the code came into operation, how many members of the public have approached government bureaus and departments for information? And which bureau or department got the highest number of requests? Deputy Secretary, in terms of figures, well, sorry, I have to take a look at the data first. Yes. Since March 1995 to the end of September 2014, there are about 44,000 requests for access to information. 2,484 were withdrawn by the applicant, and 1963 requests were related to the relevant bureaus and departments, but those bureaus and departments did not hold the information asked for, so the information was not provided. As at the 30th of September 2014, 170 cases are still being processed by bureaus and departments. From these figures, we can see that if a bureau or department is in possession of the information, $39,278 out of 38,357 applications, that is 97.6%, were entertained, and only about 2.4%, that is 930 cases, had been turned down, and that's the figure since 1995. In those cases, was it that the subject, the information subject, the data subject, asking for the information, or anybody can come forward for the information. Well, in the code, there's no definition on information. So theoretically, anybody can ask for any information from the government. Under the code, we don't even have a stipulation to obtain the particulars of the data subject asking for the information. But under certain conditions, we can reject the application. For example, other people's information, confidential information of the government, exco papers, etc. All these are set out in public, and they're all forms of information collection. For example, for certain cases, after the rejection, the Ombudsman investigated into the situation. We asked bureaus and departments reasons for refusal. There are different reasons. And there were also requests for sensitive commercial information. Mr. Charles Mock, the administration is here to discuss the issue of access to information and the many recommendations by the Ombudsman. They gave us the impression that they're still adopting a delaying tactic. They are not sincere in implementing the recommendations. For example, the setting up of an independent body. Well, other jurisdictions have laws on access to information, so they don't need an independent body. When it comes to figures, they told us that just about 2% of the applications were turned down. But those 2% of applications might be those cases that involve the very important government information that we so much wanted to get. In paragraph 18, you mention information to be added to the code's website. We asked for the bureaus and departments and the reasons for refusal. We would like to see whether the administration has been abusing the regime. And then the Ombudsman said that your website is already too old and should be updated. Every bureau and department has an officer responsible for provision of information. We asked for the names of those officers and asked where we could find the information. We also asked whether online forms could be provided to applicants to fill in. We also asked for the refusal cases. And in certain cases, you had provided answers to the applicants. So the information provided should be public information. So why not make those information public to avoid duplication of similar requests? Mr. Leung, we've tried to satisfy all requests. In paragraph 18, it said that the statistics are being processed in the current quarter for public reference. You mean case by case? Well, for case-by-case information, we're still considering it. If the applicant was able to obtain information in a particular case, we'll consider making the related information public. And each bureau or department has a contact point. And members of the public would like to fetch the appropriate person for provision of information rather than always going to the general inquiry counter. Dr. Kwakaki? Chairman, if the government wants to do something, it'll definitely do it. Well, just now we got a commissioner on electronic medical and health records. But in fact, Australia and UK are only in the process of doing this only. Not that many jurisdictions elsewhere in the world have such a commissioner. But then the government has been spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on this. Now the Ombudsman makes it clear that the government should do it by way of legislation. Secondly, there must be an independent body. There's now no legislation, no independent body. You're not 100% transparent. You said you're 98% transparent, but for the remaining 2%, under the present regime, you can still keep the information away from us. So the crux of the matter is whether or not you're determined to do so. The LLC is another joke. Well, even when the LLC asks you to legislate 90% of the case, so the government would say, oh, we're not interested. So the government didn't do it. The government is adopting a delaying tactic. They are just trying to make use of the LLC as an excuse. Deputy Secretary? Mr. Chairman, I have no further supplement. As we say in our paper, the LLC is studying the related issue. If I may refer you to the terms of reference of the LLC can look into the legal system of Hong Kong to see what improvement can be made. And the LLC studies both statutory and non-statutory means. Our viewpoint is that the LLC comprises members from different sectors of the community, including legal professionals, legal experts. So they will take reference from overseas jurisdictions also before coming up with recommendations. And on that basis, we can further consider the matter. That will be a more desirable approach. Well, Chairman, that's delaying tactic. If the LLC's conclusion is legislation, well, assuming that you get such a report from the LLC, how much time will it take to legislate? Part 2 involves administrative arrangements. Inside the government, you can have administrative measures. Then you don't need to wait till legislation. Number 1, after the LLC has completed its study, the government will have to examine the contents. I dare not say what the LLC will recommend in future. Anyway, after the LLC has completed the study and submitted a report, the government will study its contents. I don't agree that the government intentionally dragged the LLC report on. As far as I know, the LLC report is being scrutinized continuously in another subcommittee, and my bureau also scrutinizes LLC reports. But of course, when it comes to public consultation, there are other factors to consider. Sometimes you cannot do it immediately. So this varies from one case to another. As for the independent body proposed on the mainland, in most cases, if the approach chosen was legislation, legislation was only a supportive measure for administrative measures. So we really have to study the LLC report first before determining whether we should have such an independent body. Even if the answer is in the affirmative, we have to study the composition, terms of reference, etc. of that body. So it's more correct to look at the ARC report first. All right, time's up for this meeting. Item 6 on the agenda. Any other business? If there's no other business, I declare the meeting adjourned. Our next regular meeting will be on the 19th of January next year, a Monday at 2:30 p.m. Thank you.